I couldn't walk away from the emotions. You need to feel them. That's really important. But then I dusted myself off very quickly and thought, right, that's making me even more determined. And actually I gained even more determination every time I had a setback. And it got stronger rather than weaker.
Hello and welcome to the meeting room. I'm Paul Harvey. Figen Murray's son, Martyn Hett, was one of 22 innocent victims murdered in the terror attack at Manchester Arena in 2017. Figen turned tragedy into a force for good by initiating a campaign to introduce counter-terrorism legislation which mandates public venues to implement measures to better protect the public in the event of a terror attack. In May 2024, Figen walked 200 miles over 16 days from the spot where Martyn died at the Manchester Arena to 10 Downing Street, catching the attention of national media and sustaining pressure on the government. The legislation, known as Martyn's Law, received Royal Assent this year after more than 6 years of campaigning. I'm delighted to say we're joined by Figen now. Welcome to the show, Figen.
Thank you for having me on.
We're also joined by Olivia Thomas, Marketing Manager at ICC Wales, which has been a strong advocate for Martyn's Law for more than 3 years, supporting Figen's mission and leading industry-wide initiatives to educate and advocate for safety measures. Welcome to the show, Olivia.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm honoured to be here.
We're going to talk about what Martyn's Law means for venues in a second, but first, Figen, I wanted to have a look back at your campaign because it's been a heck of an achievement, really. You have redefined safety and security standards in the UK. How does it make you feel when you think about the campaign?
I am surprised that I even had to do this. To me, big venues by law have to have a certain number of toilets, of fire exits, etc. Yet there's nothing that mandated security, and I found that really shocking. So as a layperson, all those years ago when I started campaigning, I shouldn't even have had to do it. But nevertheless, here we are.
I want to take you back to kind of like the beginning. I don't want to go over the attack itself, but I wanted to highlight something that happened very early on in the first few days following the attack, which was that you made the decision to publicly forgive the attacker. I wondered if you could tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so that happened about 3.5 weeks after the attack. So obviously, because of my other children, we didn't have the TV on because they got upset. But somebody kept buying newspapers and putting them on my dining room table. I hadn't even realized exactly who did what and what happened. But on day 3, I remember walking past the dining room table and for the first time ever saw who did the attack. And because his picture was on the front page, and I looked underneath the photo and read that he was only 22 years old. I was shocked at that, and I thought, oh my goodness, you're so young. What do you even know about the world at that age? Why would you go and do this horrible thing and kill so many people, including Martyn? That was the first thing that shocked me. But 3.5 weeks in, it was the first morning I found myself totally on my own. Everybody had gone back to work and to college and school and uni. And literally, I thought, do something normal. I bought a newspaper, made myself a coffee, opened the front page of the newspaper and saw a photo of 5 men forming a human chain around a guy on the floor. And because we hadn't watched the news, I didn't know what it was about. But I read it was the Finsbury Mosque attack. And the guy who hired a van drove into the crowd as they came out of the mosque, killed 1 person, injured several others. But then he hit something and couldn't drive his van any further. And he tried to run away, but tripped and fell on the floor. And the imam and 4 other people from the mosque formed a human chain around him. And that photo really shocked me because, and then I combined it throughout the day with the other photo of the terrorist who killed Martyn. And the 2 photos together, by the end of that day, I thought, no, I need to do something drastic here, because I became aware that these 5 men, in all that chaos and literal terror, decided to make the decision to protect the man who actually did wrong. And in my view, they did what was humanely the right thing to do, because the imam said to the people who came running to try and catch him. And he said to them, "You don't touch this man. He's under our protection. The police will deal with him." And as I said, that I felt that was humanely the right thing to do. Then I thought about the young man who did the attack at Manchester, and again I thought, I, I looked at the bigger picture, and I thought, no, you are so young. You were not born a terrorist. I don't think anybody is born as a terrorist. Somebody poisoned your mind, and the two pictures combined made me reflect literally all day. And by the time my husband came home that evening, I said, "Oh, by the way, just to let you know, I rang the BBC. I'm on national TV tomorrow, publicly forgiving the terrorist." And he was surprised, but I said, "It's something I need to do. It's the right thing to do." I also became aware that Islamophobia at that time had gone up by 300% in Manchester, obviously because of the attack. And I felt that as the mother of somebody who was murdered there, I may be able somewhere along the line to break that cycle of hate that was kind of building up. And the other reason I forgave was I have 4 other children. I had at the time 4 grandchildren. I have more now, but I felt that I still need to function as a mum, as a wife, as a sibling and auntie and all the other functions. Had I allowed anger and hate to enter my heart, I wouldn't have been able to function in any of those other roles. So forgiveness to me was absolutely essential.
I'd love to know as well, before the attack, what Martyn was sort of like as a person and how he inspired you with your journey, because you obviously reference him quite a lot in this journey.
Martyn was really, he had a heart of gold. He was always looking out for the underdog. He was, somebody actually told me that a school shortly after his death did an assembly about him because apparently, unbeknown to me, every morning on his trip on the train to work, he got up at the next station to let a blind man sit who came with his wife to on the train. Every time he gave up his seat for this guy, and that sort of Martyn was just absolutely really, really kind as a person. I know I say that as a mum, and I may be biased, but actually that's the feedback I got over and over. And he had an incredible sense of humor and a skill that made everybody who came into contact with him have a feeling that they are the most important person in his life at that moment in time.
He kind of had a public profile at the time, didn't he? I mean, I remember seeing him on social media and thinking he was clearly someone who kind of lit the room up.
He absolutely, yes, loved social media. And I know he had this bet with his partner at the time that he's going to go on TV as many times as he can that one particular year. Obviously, he was a super fan of Coronation Street, so he had a few appearances. In fact, the day he died, that evening, he did a live interview on Radio 5 Live a few hours before his death.
You mentioned earlier at the beginning of when we started talking about how you were surprised that you've even had to do this. But I just wondered at what point you realised that you needed to do a campaign and kind of like, because it was a specific kind of point, wasn't it?
Obviously, we moved house in that first year, not because of his death. We had already sold the house. So Martyn knew we were going to move. So we moved house. And unfortunately, the day Martyn died was also my last working day as a psychotherapist and life coach. I realized I can't do the job anymore. Ethically, I couldn't justify it because my worldview had changed that very instance. However, so I had a lot of time on my hand, and in the first year, what happened was my children gave my husband some concert tickets to watch a singer he really likes. And it was a Father's Day gift in the June, but the concert wasn't until December 2018. And I remember that night very clearly. I was getting ready and I changed my handbag over to the smallest handbag I could find to make literally the bag search easy, because I assumed, and you should never assume, so is me right, but I assumed that the security is going to be top notch, certainly in Manchester after what happened there. And we went to the venue, and my husband gets his wallet out, gets his tickets out. We walked in. Staff looked at us and then turned away and carried on chatting. And he said, "Oh, we need to go upstairs." We went up, sat down, and that was it. And during the concert, he realized I was absolutely breaking my heart, crying, had tears streaming down my face. And he smiled and said, "It's the songs, isn't it?" And I looked at him saying, "I'm not even listening to the stupid songs." And he looked confused. He said, "Why are you crying?" And I said, "Because nobody checked my bag." I was devastated that after, less than 2 years, I mean, 18 months after the attack, here we were at a music concert. Okay, it was a smaller one, but nevertheless, a music concert. 18 months after, nobody checks anything, no security. It felt like 22 people were already forgotten and it's business as usual. And what broke my heart is that so many children died and nobody seemed to care.
That's devastating.
It was just horrible. And I just couldn't understand. And as I said, it was the first week in December, but during December, I started researching security at venues and then came across the government's counter-terrorism strategy document, the contest document, and there it was that venue security is optional.
How did you feel when you saw that?
Surprised,
Yeah.
outraged internally somehow. And you know what? I'm nobody special by doing Martyn's Law. It just takes that one person to see something that isn't right and stand up and say, "I'm not having this."
What did it start off as then? Was it started off as a petition?
It started as an online campaign, but I didn't go the change.org route. That would have got me more signatures, no doubt. I went the government petition route, and that lasts 6 months and it automatically stops. So my petition crawled up over 6 months to about 23,500 signatures. And I'm saying crawled up because 2 other ones emerged on the same site halfway through mine and overtook mine literally by the hundreds of thousands of signatures. One was Bring Back the Jeremy Kyle Show, and the other one was bring back plastic straws for McDonald's because people struggle to suck up milkshake with a paper straw.
The campaign, I mean, it started off and you were going into schools as well, is that right?
Yeah, so separately, I realized because of the terrorists being so young that actually, I should say, halfway through the first few couple of years, I started having lots of questions about why terrorists would even do that. I wondered what starts terrorism, who these people are, when it all began, why they do what they do. I questioned the ideologies. Obviously, started looking on the internet a bit and wanted to know if governments like the UK government and other countries do anything about it. And I had so many questions that I realized the only way I'm not going to get answers was to educate myself. So I started a master's in counterterrorism. And that's when I realized, as I was learning more, that young people become radicalized. And I thought, I need to get into schools. So up to now, I've probably now seen about 32,000 young people.
Wow. And what's the reaction when you speak to them?
Well, I talk to them about values that we as a human species seem to have lost when you look at the global scene right now. You only have to watch the news. Everybody is just being horrible to each other on the news, and generally, we live in a fast digital world. Nobody seems to care about each other anymore. So I try and bring children back to their value base, like kindness and tolerance and empathy and all that. But I also mainly go in to warn them about online radicalization because these bad people want to grow their ideology and they want to grow their membership, obviously, to create more havoc in the world. And young people are obviously the target group. They are the vulnerable ones who are easier to manipulate. So I try and make them understand the tactics these people use, where they operate, some of the tricks they use, some of the things they say to young people, and how they can recognize signs in themselves and others if they are in the process of being radicalized, but also how they can get help and support. So I think that's really important to do.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think as well it's bringing it probably locally, bringing it more to the person that terrorism can affect anyone. I think when you're a child, you think ultimately it's in far countries, it happens abroad, you never sort of will interact with terrorism. And it's actually that it's now digitally, it can be on your phone. We have this big movement, don't we, at the minute with people being misogynistic and children being radicalized to grow up misogynistic. And I think ultimately terrorism feels even more further away. And as a child, you almost don't really ever think about it unless you walk into the room when your parents are watching the news. So I think, and that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it is bringing it back to that whole, it can happen in the UK.
Totally. Because, you're so right, because we think, oh, that'll never affect me. I used to watch the news, terror attacks in America and in Nice and in Germany, and you think, oh my God, those poor people, because the media always home in on people crying and supporting each other, and you feel really sorry for these people. But then you think, oh, thank God it's not in our world. And suddenly we became the news, and my God, that was a wake-up call. So, and actually, the school talks, funny enough, I have had quite a few visits to the school, to the secondary school, where the three Abedi brothers actually went. The terrorist and his brothers were actually children at school themselves. So I quite often go to that school, and that was only about a mile and a half from where we used to live before. So I could have shopped in the same supermarket as his mum, so it really brings it home.
In terms of Martyn's Law, or Protect Duty as it was kind of initially known, there was initial public consultation in about 2021. Is that right? And so how did that feel when that kind of all started happening?
Yeah, like with anything in life, there are obviously people who are not in agreement. So I had a bit of resistance there from people who worried about that Martyn's Law will destroy community centres and village halls, that Martyn's Law will cause small businesses to have to close down. And none of that is really the case, because really Martyn's Law has always, right from the start, been sort of in a way proportionate. We've always said this is a legislation that is proportionate depending on the size of the venue. So we're not asking people to spend lots of money. Certainly the smaller venues and businesses, we don't ask them to spend any money. There is training that is provided free of charge by the government. Nobody has to pay for training. So it literally is just a matter of paying 1 hour staff wages, and that's all that is required to train staff. In fact, the legislation actually now in its present format doesn't even require anybody to do training. I still recommend it, because you need to know who your enemy is and what you're actually protecting yourself from. But that training is free, and we're asking people in Martyn's Law is sort of in 2 tiers, 2 sections. So the standard duty, the standard tier, is any business or venue from 200 people up to 799 people capacity. And those venues, all we're asking is that people there know, in case of danger, how to lock down a building, how to evacuate if they can't, if danger is just outside, if the danger comes inside, how to evacuate, and how to communicate to each other, the customer, staff, colleagues, but also with the outside authorities. And that's literally in the standard duty, the lower tier. That's all we're asking to do. Training is an extra bonus, but I highly recommend that people do that free of charge training, which is on the Protect UK website. It's called the ACT training. There's also a 15-minute, the ACT training is about an hour. There's also a 15-minute video that you can just watch on YouTube. It's called Scan for All Staff, SCAN, and that gives you a really good insight into what bad people come and look for at venues to suss out your place in order to attack it. Both really, really valuable bits of training anyone in the UK can access. And the enhanced duties for venues, 800 plus, and literally they are asked all the stuff that the standard duty people need to do, But in addition, they're also asked to put measures in place that avoid terrorist attacks from happening in the first place.
So, Olivia, I just wanted to come to you because obviously the ICC Wales came on board with the campaign quite early on and was a big kind of like supporter. I just wondered if you could tell us a bit about how ICC Wales got involved.
I think originally it was that obviously we saw you, Figen, at a talk, and your charisma shines through when you speak, and your passion. Obviously what you're speaking about is very emotive. And it was just the sort of thought process of ultimately, as people, step away from your job description for a moment. It's shocking that what you were speaking about wasn't legislation at the time. And ultimately, I think a lot of people in the business were shocked as to how little had changed since the attack. So we came on board around 2022, and one of the first things we decided to do was create our report, which I have in front of me here. And ultimately, from that, we gathered a lot of different voices and opinions to feed into it. And I think one of the ways that we really wanted to change the industry is be forward thinking with it, be innovative, not just wait for legislation to come into place and say, we're just going to hold off and sort of see what others do. ICC Wales doesn't work like that anyway. And I think a lot of venues don't want to work that way. But I think ultimately, the initial step was just coming forward to you, Figen, and asking your opinion and seeing what you wanted our help with moving forward.
At that stage, Figen, I think I'm right, in 2022, because you received an OBE for your campaigning in the 2022 New Year's Honours, I think. Is that right?
I did, thank you, yeah.
I mean, how did that feel to get that?
A bit surreal because obviously I don't do anything I do to get any titles or awards and recognition. I just do it as a mum, really, And you need to remember, I am a mother who at home in her office at home has a bookshelf with Martyn's ashes there and his cat's ashes because she died exactly 3 weeks after he died, apparently of a broken heart, we were told.
Oh, dear.
So I have those urns at home and I'm thinking no parent should be in that situation. And that's the reason I work so hard on this, but never for any recognition. But yeah, it was obviously an honor and a privilege to receive the title, but it came unexpected.
Even at that point, there was still a lot of work to be done
Yes.
to actually get Martyn's Law on the statute books. I mean, it took quite a while after that, didn't
Yeah,
it?
it took 6 years and 3 months. Totally. What started off at my kitchen table with an online campaign very quickly turned into a full-time job and beyond, actually. I worked flat out on it. In fact, it made me poorly.
Did it become quite frustrating at times that how slowly things were moving?
Never frustrating. So, I don't people often say to me, "You must have got angry at times." I've never really got angry at any point about anything. I felt hurt sometimes, but one of the things that I did was because of my previous role as a therapist, I have a lot of insights into different things, and I used some of the skills from my previous profession. And when I had hurtful things happen and setbacks, of course, I needed to go away in a corner, feel sorry for myself, feel pathetic, feel a bit self pity. But then I needed to feel the emotion. I couldn't walk away from the emotions. You need to feel them. That's really important. But then I dusted myself off very quickly and thought, right, that's making me even more determined. And actually, I gained even more determination every time I had a setback, and it got stronger rather than weaker.
And that determination as well, was that what fueled the walk from Manchester to Downing Street?
The walk came about in 2023. Because we had many meetings in the Home Office with different staff, and Brendan Cox and I one of the days. Nick couldn't make that day,
Husband of Joe Cox, the murdered MP.
so he was one of my main campaigners, and Nick Aldworth was the third main campaigner. So the three of us often had meetings with the Home Office, either during COVID via Teams or face to face. And during one of the face-to-face meetings, that meeting didn't go so well, and I got really frustrated. And outside the Home Office, Brendan and I were talking, and he said, "What do you reckon?" And I said, "Well, I'm really fed up. I feel like they're backpedaling. It's not going the right way. Do you know what I feel like doing, Brendan? I feel like doing a protest march from Manchester to London to shame the government into it. I'll take the media with me." And he laughed, and he said, "Don't be ridiculous. That's a crazy idea. You don't need to do that." And then he patted me on the shoulder and said, "Don't you worry. We'll work. It'll get done. I'll have a word with a few of my mates in government." And we parted company that day. Anyway, that was sort of in middle of the year. First week in January 24, he rang me and he said, "Happy New Year, Figen. Remember the conversation outside the Home Office about the walk?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "You're right. You need to do it. Start practicing." And that's how the walk came about. And I really literally had to practice every weekend. My husband dragged me out in all weathers, Saturday and Sunday, to literally
Build up your
train. Yeah,
strengths,
absolutely.
presumably.
Because to be honest, I'm ashamed to say neither of us are sporty people. So we literally had to walk and walk and walk further and further.
And it really did kind of capture people's attention, didn't it? It focused things back on the campaign again.
It's the only way we could put pressure on the government, and it was really important we did it. And we were told afterwards that the walk really did put a lot of pressure on the government.
It was kind of a strange time as well, wasn't it? Because there was kind of the government was a bit in turmoil. I think that because it was Rishi Sunak you met at
Yes, so
Downing
we
Street.
met Rishi Sunak on the 22nd of May, which was the 7th anniversary. And 3 hours after the meeting, he announced the general election.
And how did that feel?
I remember thinking, thank God the meeting was at 12:40 and not at 3 o'clock, because it would have actually not happened, the meeting. I think they would have cancelled it, and the walk would have been for absolutely nothing, and the media would have been caught up in election frenzy. So thank God it happened at 12:40.
So did you meet Keir Starmer as well?
We met, initially we met Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, and the then Home Secretary, James Cleverly. And then half an hour later, we met Sir Keir Starmer, yeah.
And obviously Keir Starmer has followed, he promised you that day, I think.
Yes, he promised me, and I remember shaking his hand and smiling, thanking him for the promise, and thinking, yeah, I had that promise before from a Prime Minister. Let's see. Yeah, let's see. Well, it was very, my learning was be careful about promises. Don't rely on the promises too much, because of my previous experience. But I have to give credit where credit is due, though. All the work the previous government, previous security ministers, previous home secretaries have done have actually paved the way to Martyn's Law. Only the last government never finished it. They ran out of time, but they put the foundations down. So I can't really say that they didn't do anything. They just didn't see it through. But they could have done it had they really wanted to.
Yeah.
That's all I can say
Whereas
about
Keir
it.
Starmer, he made that promise to you and
Yes.
he followed through on it, and then
Yeah,
it received Royal Assent. And
absolutely.
how did that feel?
Yeah, it happened very quickly. In fact, so quick that we could barely keep up with it. It felt really good that, and obviously we attended absolutely every single debate, both in the House of Commons and in the House of Lords, with about 17, 18 trips back and forth to London. But absolutely, I'd do it all over again. It was well worth it. And, obviously, as the campaign team, I needed to be there to support all the debates. They weren't easy to listen to. There was criticism again, and it hurt. But yeah, it is what it is. We live in a democracy. Not everybody has to agree with me.
The stage we're at the moment, it received Royal Assent, but that doesn't mean it's actually in force yet, does it? There's a 2-year, is it
Yeah.
called an implementation period?
Yes.
And so, Olivia, you might be able to pick up on this.
Yeah.
What do venues have to do before it actually comes into force? What steps do venues have to take?
Well, at the moment, there's sort of no clear-cut guidance. We're waiting on that at the moment. But as I mentioned previously, that isn't to say do nothing at this stage. It's very important to be speaking as we now move into the compliance stage, moving away from potentially your marketing team, your sales team. Speak to your operational team that are going to be actually implementing these elements of legislation. ICC Wales at the moment, we've got CCTV coverage across our public areas, risk assessments for all of our events, bag checks, access control, and we've also got training. Training is that huge gap that we have found within our report. Figen's also found within her campaign. And I think, any organization you go into, you have health and safety training. They tell you, especially in food and beverage, which is what I originally came from, don't don't spit in a cup to sort of clean it, that sort of thing. Simple training procedures like that, nut allergies for your customers. But nothing in any organization, and nowhere in any organization I've ever been to, have they talked about terrorism apart from when I've joined ICC Wales. And I think it is just having that honest and open conversation with your team. Where are your gaps in your knowledge? And if there are large gaps, I think look at those free resources that they have on government website, but also reach out to your network. I think a lot of venues with Martyn's Law now have been knitted together and have come together and have that community. Obviously we had the working group during the campaign, and I think ultimately now venues feel so much more confident to reach out to one another and say, "What are you doing? We're not quite where we need to be, and we're not sure where we want to be as we wait for the guidance. But what are you doing?" And ICC Wales welcomes everyone to come forward for that and to speak to us and ask what we're doing and how we can help, really.
Figen, you were saying earlier, you touched on it earlier, there's no need to pay for any of this training, is there?
No, but you're making a really good point, Olivia, because sharing good practice is so easy, isn't it? And people can reach out and support each other. The bigger venues could maybe support and guide some of the smaller venues. It's really, really good. Why reinvent the wheel? But actually, the guidance will come eventually. It's a Section 27 guidance. It will eventually come. But like you said, Olivia, ICC Wales have already been doing a lot of what needs to be done. What's actually fairly common sense. Look at your CCTV provision. Is it up to date? Does everybody operating it, have they got the training to see what they need to see? Access control, is your access control system up to date? That I'm talking about the bigger venues, or do you need to maybe improve it? And can I also say there's new technology coming up every single year. I go to security expos every year, and there's more and more mass screening technology coming out that is really good. That makes all the searches so much easier. Where they can do about 1,000, 2,000 people in an hour. They can screen. It's sort of really good stuff. And in this time in 5-10 years, that technology will be even more developed. So it's going to get easier, but actually no venue, big or small, should ever be thinking, we don't need to do this because nothing's going to happen here. That complacency is absolutely futile.
Definitely. And you touched on a really interesting point there. I think from organisers' perspective as well, a lot of people thought if we put heightened security measures in place, it's going to affect the delegate experience. It's not. And actually, since Martyn's Law has been announced that it's coming into legislation, we've had a lot of organisers come forward and say, actually, we want that heightened security in our event. And that's really heartening to see because they know that we can achieve it and we're really passionate to make their event as efficient and as streamlined as possible, even with those heightened measurements of security. Ultimately, you want to safeguard everyone, delegates, but also your staff. I think that's what you need to think as a venue. This isn't just the delegate or visitor experience. This is protecting every single person in the building.
Planners and organisers, they should be talking to their venues about Martyn's Law.
100%. It should be on your radar like sustainability is at this point. We do risk assessments for every event, and I think venues ultimately should be helping organisers in being able to achieve the event they want to safely and securely.
Have you had any feedback from the general public about increased security measures?
From the general public, not really, because the main goal is we don't really want the general public to feel that there's that sort of encroachment on their event. Really, a very well done event should not feel much different. I think the perspective is from organisers, we're having a lot of feedback where people are sort of unsure on the added cost. That's the main thing. And I think that is the sort of main feedback we're going to see from organisers is how is this going to affect the budget for my event? And I don't think at this stage the answer is clear cut. It's sort of on the venues at this stage how much they want to sort of help and be able to provide for event organisers. But I think ultimately feedback is very positive and people want that heightened security and the legislation in place. But I think it's that area of uncertainty. And I think there'll be a lot more of feeding into the conversation once we have that guidance.
Finally, Figen, I just wanted to touch on you mentioned earlier that you're making a move into motivational speaking. Is that right?
My role as a very active campaigner is slowing down a little bit now. Thankfully, it was really full on. But I feel I've been reflecting a lot over the last few years, all the skills I had to use. Do you know what? I had to dig really deep to absolutely keep my resilience going. And I've come to the decision that some of the stuff I had to use, might actually be really helpful to the general public, to other people, because bad things happen to all of us at any one point. And I feel I have skills I can pass on to people that will help them both in their private and their professional life.
I guess we're just looking forward to Martyn's law coming into effect then. Is that right?
Yes, very much so. And I think the 2-year implementation period is important so that venues can prepare themselves, they can train their staff, they can put the infrastructure in place for the bigger venues. The smaller places, they can get their head around it and lose some of the fear that they have around it because it is not meant to be arduous for small businesses and small venues.
What do you think it'll feel like when that law eventually does come into effect? Because as I said at the top of the podcast, you have effectively helped change safety and security regulations in the UK.
Yes, I have, but funny enough, the general public don't know about the legislation, which I find ironic because this is a legislation to keep the general public safe. Yet, if you go on any high street and you ask 100 people, have you heard of Martyn's Law? I'd say 90% of those people will say, never heard of it. 5 might say, yeah, I heard the expression, but I don't know what it means. And 5 might say, I know what it is. And that simply is at the moment not good enough, but there is no public awareness campaign as yet. Nearer the time there will be when the implementation period is over. And I'm looking forward to the day when people are actually going to venues and are challenging venues if they are not immediately up to standard and say, why did you not check the bag? Why did that person go in with a rucksack? You are not doing your job properly. You need to protect me. And people will demand to be protected. And that day will come. There will be a period of confusion. Like with anything new, as human beings, we're social animals. We don't do change very easy. We like the same stuff over and over again, but people will eventually get their head round it and will demand security and safety.
Well, Figen, you have the most incredible gift of making things topical. That is, as in the marketing world, we know how hard that is. As you mentioned, your campaign got overtaken by Jeremy Kyle and straws. That's because it's topical. You made Martyn's Law topical, easy to digest, and accessible for both the mice industry, but the general public too. They just need to be made more aware of it.
Yes, yeah. But I thank ICC Wales for absolutely being on board so early ahead of the game, really, and thankfully other venues are doing similar stuff now, and hopefully by the time the implementation period is over, the general public can be so much safer. So thank you.
Absolutely. And that just about wraps everything up. So thank you very much, Olivia and Figen, for joining me here today on the meeting room, and best of luck with everything.
Thank you.
Thank you.